Kwesi Adofo-Mensah Day to those of you who celebrate. The Minnesota Vikings got a new GM, and we are here to talk about it. I'm here with our usual Vikings Report Rewind crew, my partner in crime on Vikings Report with Drew and Ted, Drew Bunning, and the Kaiser Sose of our usual gang of suspects, Christopher Gates, the founder and head lead / numero uno blogger of the Daily Norseman. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing all right, Ted, Drew, Toonces, everybody that's currently celebrating getting aboard the Kwesi train. And yeah, this is going to be a brand new era in Minnesota Vikings history. Can't wait.
Drew, what was your initial reaction when you heard Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was the new Minnesota Vikings GM? I think it was first reported by Adam Schefter fairly early this morning.
Climbing on the Kwesi train. Kwesi? Is that how it goes, Chris? That's very good. I see what you did there. Very happy with it. Very happy because that's the guy I really wanted, kind of, in the long run.
I'm told that's how it's pronounced. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Kwesi?
Is it Kwesi or is it Kwesi? I still have not heard an NFL network or television personality say so.
We're going to do this. It's a long 8 months till the season starts, and I'm not going to say that long name 100,000 times. So you guys come up with a nickname, and I will follow the nickname. Please make it short.
I'm going to just say Adofo-Mensah for right now, so I don't mispronounce his first name, whatever it is.
That works.
Okay.
Awesome.
I will say Cam.
Yeah. Now people think you're talking about Cam Newton.
I don't want to do that. No.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Then I'll end up with a towel on my head. Whole thing will be ruined. How you doing, Ted Glover?
I'm doing good. So as we all know, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was named the new Vikings GM. I don't believe the Minnesota Vikings have officially announced it yet, but it's been breaking all over the place. We expect to hear official announcements soon. I'm sure they're touring him through the facilities. They're doing all that good stuff, bringing his family in, mom, dad, wife, kids. Don't know if he's married or not, whatever the deal is. And I would expect that there's going to be a press conference sometime tomorrow to sign the deal. I heard it's 4 years, $12 million. One of the questions that has come up, and I'm waiting to get into the Adofo-Mensah details because we've got a guest coming on hopefully soon, Nick Olson, and we're gonna get in all the analytics side of the house. But so hopefully he'll be with us real shortly. There was debate, and I don't think it's a big deal now, about whether Ryan Poles or Adofo-Mensah was the Vikings' number one choice. Does it matter at this point, Chris?
No, it sure doesn't. I mean, they have their two guys that they requested second interviews for, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your viewpoint, the Bears got an opportunity to interview Ryan Poles before the Vikings did, and they made him an offer that he couldn't turn down, and he's in Chicago now, so they got one of their guys, and that's all that matters.
Drew, I think Ryan Poles emerged as like kind of a, I don't want to say out of nowhere, or if he was out of nowhere, he wouldn't have been interviewed to begin with. But if Vegas was taking betting odds, I don't know that Ryan Poles was like on the short list initially for the Vikings. Adofo-Mensah's name was out there.
Out there from the beginning, Mensah.
Yeah. But Poles kind of closed the gap, and then kind of it was sort of thought that he might have been the favorite. Do you think he was the Vikings' favorite or Adofo-Mensah, or does it matter?
I don't really think it matters. I think both the guys are really qualified. I don't really know what was going on. It seemed like the Vikings were the more attractive place to go if I was a general manager. I mean,
yeah,
practice facilities, roster, you look at all that stuff right down the line. But I kind of figured over the weekend when we had our live show during the Bills and Chiefs game, we were talking about Poles going to Chicago first.
Yeah.
And I said he's probably not getting out of Chicago. That's probably where he's going to go. But look who's here. Look who's here.
I was going to say, ladies and gentlemen, you've seen him pop up on our screen. We want to take give a really big welcome to Nick Olson. You can find him on Twitter at Nick Olson NFL. He writes for Vikings Territory Zone coverage. His stuff's been on the Star Tribune. It's been in the Athletic. He's got like 500 podcasts across the Climbing the Pocket network. You can also find those on the Daily Norseman, and his newest podcast, Kindred Skulls, with our old friend Matt Freese and hopefully future buddy Greg Blake. Nick Olson, how are you, my man?
I'm doing great, Ted. Thank you for that lovely introduction. That was awesome.
Jeez, man, save some time for us, man.
Be quiet. We're talking. Nick's on. We're talking.
Great job, Nick. Great job, Nick. Glad you're here.
Nick, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on is because you were an Adofo-Mensah guy. You were driving the train before it even left the station, I think, before the Viking season ended. And you were kind of pounding the desk for this guy all along. What is it about Kwesi? Do we know for sure? Is it Kwesi or is it Kwesi?
It's Kwesi.
It's Kwesi. So I was wrong. I was 0 for 2. So Kwesi. All right. I'm just going to go with Adofo-Mensah. What was it about him that attracted you as being the good fit, the right fit for the Minnesota Vikings as the GM?
There are a lot of things. I mean, the big thing that he brings to the table, and the thing that you're going to see anybody who talks about him mention, is he comes up from an analytics background. He was with the 49ers in their analytics department for 8 years before he went on to join Andrew Berry in Cleveland, and he was with San Francisco for that first Super Bowl appearance they had at the beginning of the decade. So just a very talented, bright mind, cut from a different cloth than the normal GM track. This is the first time in NFL history you're seeing a guy come up not from the traditional path, which is, you start out as a scout and you grind tape and you work your way up, become a director of college scouting. This is kind of what Ryan Poles is. That's like the traditional path, and you work your way up and you eventually earn a lot of trust and have a great eye for talent. And then you get promoted and you take on more of the GM, the management responsibilities, contracts and stuff. And that's how you position yourself for a general manager position. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is completely different track. He started out on Wall Street. Before that, he got his master's degree in economics from Stanford. He studied economics at Princeton, and was on Wall Street for a while, and then decided, I want to do something different, and he switched into analytics at the 49ers. So he went on from that track, started to make a name for himself. And then ended up joining Andrew Berry in Cleveland and became essentially what George Payton was to Rick Spielman, the number 2 guy in the building. That's who Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was to Andrew Berry in Cleveland. So everybody talks about the analytics stuff, and that's huge. I mean, and that's not just fourth down decision makings. That's not just when to kick a field goal versus when to go for 2 in the NFL, but that's how do we get an edge on scouting guys in college? What are things that we can pick up from the combine data or player tracking data in college? Or can we see how fast somebody is on the, maybe they run a 40 time this fast, but how fast are they based on their college tape or something? Things like that. Are there edges to be found? Positional value. So college scouting, pro scouting, it's sports science, it's keeping your players healthy and making sure they recover more quickly. So analytics touches on all those, not to mention the front office, like selling tickets, generating revenue. So they have their hands in a lot of different cookie jars. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah brings all that to the table, in addition to being not just a nerd, but he's a real football guy too. This guy he was a massive rising star. Everybody you talk to him, every interview is this guy is future GM written all over him. It's only a matter of time. 40 years old, he gets promoted. The Athletic had their 40 under 40 list, and he was the number 1 guy on their list last year. So just a very hot riser. And in the past 2 years under Andrew Berry, I think the Browns have done a lot of really interesting things. They weren't able to get into the playoffs and repeat their success this year because Baker Mayfield got hurt and a lot of other bad things happened to them. But they've had a lot of really great decisions. They've had some great drafts in the last 2 years in Cleveland. So I think once he was able to get a little bit more of that, more rounded out experience doing, contract management, helping in the draft, helping with player decisions, helping build a roster on top of all his 49ers analytics experience, he just brings a very unique skill set that we haven't seen before. And, it's kind of what I like about it is the Vikings are swinging for the fences here. If this fails, it's probably going to fail pretty spectacularly because nobody's tried this before. Nobody's had an analytics guy. They don't, it's kind of weird. It's you don't have you're going to have a guy making decisions about a roster who doesn't have a lot of actual scouting experience. That's scary in a sense, but at the same time, if the NFL goes the same way that every other major sports league in America, that baseball's gone with sabermetrics, that the NBA has gone with the 3-point revolution, then this is going to be, the Vikings are going to be at the very forefront of an analytics revolution in the NFL. And this is a chance for them to if they win, people always say it's a copycat league in the NFL, but people that win Super Bowls in the NFL aren't usually not the copiers. They're the ones that everybody else is trying to copy. So this is a chance for the Vikings to be a team that everybody else wants to start copying. So that's what I think is exciting about it.
So you think he stinks, basically? I mean, too long didn't read. He's terrible. No, I'm kidding. You mentioned the analytics stuff, and you touched on a little bit, and I think one of the reasons we wanted to have you on is because our audience, look, as you can tell, we're not from the analytics school. And a lot of people hear the word analytics and they think it's maybe smoke and mirrors. I mean, everybody's heard of Moneyball, and as you've seen the movie or read the book, they've heard the term sabermetrics and they've heard the term analytics. Now, I know it's a different way to evaluate players. It's a different way to approach the game in game situations, and it's more than that, as you touched on. How do you think Adofo-Mensah's analytics background will change the way the Vikings do business in terms of looking for players? Let's just start with free agency and the draft, for example.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, analytics, people have, I think, a lot of misconceptions about it because so much of our attention and the media's attention on analytics gets to just game management decisions like fourth downs or when to go for it, when to kick field goals or something. When it comes to player evaluation, player talent, it's not just building models, but I mean, like analytics guys are like, coders, programmers that just, what they do is they take large amounts of data and they just translate it into something you can actionable information that you can present to a head coach and be like, this is something you can use to make a decision. So a lot of times when we think of analytics, we think of like nerds on a computer, but like when you're doing scouting for an opponent and you chart every single third down that your upcoming opponent has done and what sorts of concepts they like to rely on so that like what third down calls to go with, that's analytics too. That's just a large summation of information. And this is something that analytics guys do nowadays. Like the Vikings will turn to their analytics team and be like, how is Jared Goff against the blitz? Like, should we be blitzing him more on Sunday? Should we be rotating coverage down? How does he do? Like, if you give him a pre-snap look on defense and you roll a safety down after the snap, does that, how does he adjust to that compared to the average NFL quarterback? So that's all actionable information that analytics people are able to do. And now that you have a GM that like understands this, that like, not just, talks the talk on analytics, but like rose up from those ranks and is going to be able to dedicate resources to it. I think it's going to change a lot of the way that the Vikings do business when it comes to like player evaluation and player, information. I think Brad Holmes actually had an interesting story about like Cooper Kupp, how they were able to find him when he was in LA with the Rams. They knew that like Cooper Kupp ran like a slow 40-yard dash or something. There's like a 4.6, 4.57 or something. So on the lower end, so they knew he would be able to fall in the draft, but they were able to use his college, his college tracking, his college scouting like tape. And they were able to see like, okay, he ran a slow 40, but based on like, his college tape, he actually is a lot faster than that 40-yard dash says. So, and he's able to get in and out of his breaks really quickly. And it's gone on to show, like now Cooper Kupp is almost breaking records as a wide receiver. They were able to find a lot of value in the draft out of that. So that was sort of not that Brad Holmes is a big analytics guy, but he's not Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. He wasn't like in the analytics department. That's a way that analytics can inform your college scouting and how you approach the draft. On top of all the things that we talk about in analytics about like trading up in the draft and versus trading back, positional value, the edges you can find there. So it's going to affect all of that, I think.
Now you mentioned the draft and that sounds, guys, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but that sounds like a complete 180 from Rick Spielman, who now in Rick's defense a little bit, he said he was a guy that was embracing analytics. I don't know that he was maybe kind of a toe in the pool kind of guy with it compared to a guy like Adofo-Mensah, but you fully expect the Vikings to go all in or with analytics, or will they use kind of maybe a 50-50 split, 60-40 split? What do you envision this new frontier, I guess, for lack of a better word, with an analytics guy running the football operation?
Yeah, I think it's going to change everything. And I think the architect behind the Kwesi Adofo-Mensah hire is this guy, Andrew Miller, who's the Vikings COO, which, is kind of like functionally the CEO. He's not a wilf, but like he's kind of running the show, I think, nowadays, now that Spielman and Zimmer are out of the building. He's like kind of it's like a committee, but he's like the head of the committee. So, and he came up from a baseball sabermetrics perspective. He worked with the Cleveland Indians as like an analytics guy. And that's how he kind of.
And didn't Adofo-Mensah work with D. Podesta, the guy from the Dodgers too? Like way back in the day?
it's like a small world. So there are connections there. But like, so Andrew Miller goes from Sabermetrics to the Blue Jays management role, and that's how the Vikings hired him to be COO a couple of years. And Andrew Miller and Adofo-Mensah are tight. So when you have that like institutional buy-in, I think you're going to see, right now the Vikings have 4 analytics staffers, which is actually above average for the NFL, but the baseball teams have dozens. So it's easy to envision them hiring more and more guys. It's easy to see them hiring like an in-game analytics guy who's on the headset with the coach being like, we recommend you go for it in 4th down based on our models or whatever. It's easy to see them building out like the college, like the college scouting programs to leverage what the analytics staffers can do. But most of all, I mean, like, analytics isn't a monolith, and hopefully that's something I'm getting across here, is that it's not like, the idea. And one of the things you see when you read about like what people value in Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and what impresses them so much about him is that he's like a really good listener and collaborator. So it's not just going to be like we have our analytics guys versus the other guys. It's going to be like, no, they need to be all talking to each other. And like the traditional football guys need to be able to learn to use the data that the analytics guys have to be able to translate this and communicate it in a way that's useful for everybody. And that way there's like institutional buy-in, and they're all able to sort of collaborate and make use of the information and the strategy and the processes that the analytics team are putting out. So I do think you're going to see an expansion of the teams. I do think you're going to see more resources allocated to it. But I also feel like this is going to be like, the idea is to like make Jamal Stevenson, director of college scouting, make his job easier, give him more information that he can use with, make it a little easier for him to put together a big board and figure out who you're going to draft on draft day. Make it easier for Ryan Monens when he's doing his pro scouting to feel like, hey, this offensive lineman that we're finding, this guy's more of a Josh Klein as opposed to a Alex Boone or whoever you want to pick from the graveyard of Vikings free offensive lineman free agents. So,
you had to pick an Ohio State dude. Seriously, really?
No, not. Hey, we have other Ohio State Vikings offensive linemen. That's how bad the list is. Is like I got guys from all over the place I can pick on the Vikings offensive line. So
true. Hey, and Drew, Chris, if you guys have any questions, jump right in. But oh, go ahead.
So Nick, well, thanks for coming on for starters.
My pleasure.
One question, you talked about Adofo-Mensah being part of the Browns front office and whatnot. Are there things that we think, or you think we can look at from the past couple of Cleveland Browns off season, since he's been there and been part of the chain of command, that we should expect to kind of see from the Vikings this coming off season, whether it's, roster construction, free agency, draft, things of that nature, that hopefully gives us something to kind of, look at as kind of a blueprint for how they're going to handle things here?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's hard to draw any like big conclusions out of just 2 years of decision making, but I think the Browns wouldn't, and it's hard to also tease out like what's Kevin Stefanski like weighing his thumb on the scale versus Andrew Berry versus Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. But some of the things that I like that the Browns have done that I feel like has distinguished them as an organization, and which you can, it's easy to see Kwesi Adofo-Mensah being a big part of that as like the number 2 guy in Cleveland, is they did a phenomenal job rebuilding their offensive line in the last few years. I think the number one reason for that is when Kevin Stefanski came out of Minnesota, got hired to head coach, he immediately hired as his assistant head coach, who's the guy who was in Washington forever, like a very high Bill Callahan. They hired Bill Callahan, and just like a legendary, like up there with Scarnecchia as like best offensive line gurus in the game. And immediately you saw a lot of progression from a lot of their offensive linemen. They made some really good signings. They signed Jack Conklin to like a 3-year, $30 million deal, which is like, the next year, like the right tackle market, like ballooned 50%. Brian O'Neill got like, I think like 5 years, 75 million or 80 million or something. So a substantial link. So they were able to like get in on the market there really quickly. I think the other thing they did that was really interesting is they really prioritized this past offseason, rebuilding their secondary. And, we've seen a lot of debate going back and forth about, is it better to have a good pass rush or good coverage? I mean, obviously they complement each other, but in terms of which do you choose to prioritize? Granted, Cleveland already has Myles Garrett. They already have a lot of good pass rushers there. So it made a little more sense to add in on the back end, but they added John Johnson, who's a really good safety coming out of LA. They added one of the nickel guys who they signed to a really good deal, to a long-term deal, their nickel cornerback for like 4 years, 20 million, I think. So they were able to like rebuild a lot of their secondary as well. So I feel like those two things that we saw in Cleveland are also perfectly, applicable right now to where the Vikings are, where there are only two cornerbacks on the roster going into next year, pending, re-signing Patrick Peterson or anybody. But right now it's just Cam Dantzler and Harrison Hand. Those are the only guys on the roster. So they got a little bit of work to do in the cornerback room. You got an aging Harrison Smith, and then we'll see if they bring back, the Xavier Woods, or if they like Cam Bynum and having him start. But they've got some work to do with the secondary, and they got their work cut out for them on the offensive line. So those two things that I think he had a lot of success with in Cleveland. I hope those are trends that we can see him have a plan to attack with the Vikings as well. So those are two places to start.
One thing, and you had mentioned this, and Drew, you had talked about this, is his finance background, and he said something to the effect that he wanted to get smart on the salary cap because he kind of wanted, I don't know that he wanted to become an expert, but he didn't want to get blindsided by a deal or something like that. Drew, remember what was it you were exactly saying about on one of our shows about Adofo-Mensah and the salary cap? Like he's going to be a salary cap guy, or
I don't really think there's going to be any more problems with the salary cap, to be honest with you. Him and Brzezinski, whatever, together. I'll jump on the secondary for the Browns a little bit. How, the Greedy Williams, what a great value he was when he fell in the draft. And then Grant Delpit, great player that I researched out of LSU. They really have done a great job with their secondary. One thing I wanted to talk about a little bit. Well, first off, please tell me that the analytic strategy on 3rd and 12 isn't throwing it to Ham out in the flat.
No.
I'm on board if that play is taken out of the whole lineup. Secondly, you know what they didn't do, what I thought was interesting, and this might have been more Andrew Berry and not so much Mensah, but they worked together in Cleveland. If I remember right, didn't Josh Allen sign that big deal with Buffalo before 2021? Well deserved. I mean, Josh Allen's a hell of a quarterback. But then we all expected Baker Mayfield to be the next big guy going to earn this big contract, and they never gave it to him, which, it's unheard of. And everybody just throws money around, but they held off for some reason. I think that it ended up being pretty much a smart decision, not throwing a bunch of money at Baker Mayfield at this juncture, right?
They showed some good patience with their quarterback decision making there, and I think it's like the Ravens found themselves in the same position with Lamar Jackson. Like, this guy's a really talented, but do we really want to commit to him? And I think a lot of teams are seeing themselves. They're looking at the Kirk Cousins of the world and seeing, do we want to have a Kirk Cousins or a Derek Carr, or a guy who's good, but is he good enough? And we're always going to be fighting that, and we're always going to be dealing with the salary cap situation. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I still don't know what the Browns are going to do with Baker. He's one of those quarterbacks who's like, you see the tools he has. He's got a tremendous arm, and he's got great improvisational ability. So and when he's healthy, he throws an accurate ball too. So he's a good quarterback. It's easy to buy into his upside, his future. But this past year was a bit of a disappointment. Granted, he wasn't healthy, but it was a good foresight for them to hold off on it. So I think that's a good point. And it probably ties into what everybody is wondering, what the new GM is going to do with Kirk Cousins is, if that's what he was willing to do with Baker Mayfield, then he probably has a high bar that maybe Kirk Cousins doesn't necessarily hit. I think hiring Kwesi Adofo-Mensah probably increases the odds that we see Kirk Cousins dealt in the offseason, I would say.
My next question was leading right into that, Nick. I wanted to get your take on, he's going to sit down. He has to hire a head coach. Maybe we should talk about that and get your ideas. But when he flips that book open, the first thing he's got to look at is the elephant in the room, which is Cousins' contract.
That other than head coach, that is going to be his first significant emotional event of a decision. So let's talk about coach, and then we'll come back to the Cousins. Nick, who do you like? Now, I think I have this timeline right. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah came in and interviewed with the Vikings. He left. They brought in a couple other guys, and in that time between Adofo-Mensah's first interview and second interview, they brought in D'Amico Ryans, who was an assistant on San Francisco's staff, and it's kind of speculated now that they had asked him in the interview, "Hey, who are some of your head coach preferences?" and he named D'Amico Ryans. So it was sort of thought he was brought in to interview at the behest of Adofo-Mensah. Do you think there's smoke to that fire? And are there any other names out there that you think they could be looking at, or are they kind of down to maybe a couple guys now?
Definitely. And I think, it's funny. I feel like a lot of the guys you see them tied to are guys from the Shanahan, McVay, Kubiak's, that whole tree, that coaching tree. So, I mean, obviously, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has all the 49ers connections, being almost a decade with the 49ers organization. And even though he was in the scouting department, like he built relationships with everybody in that building too. So that would make a lot of sense. They're obviously, D'Amico Ryans has done a really good job with that defense, despite being pretty banged up, not having a lot of secondary guys to play with. I mean, obviously we've got Nick Bosa up front, but for the rest of the defense, I think he's done a good job with them. So that's interesting. And Raheem Morris, I think also a really interesting name, somebody who's coached on both sides of the ball. Obviously, the Rams defense this year was very good. Obviously, also it's not hard to have a very good defense when you have Aaron Donald and Von Miller and Jalen Ramsey, but still, it's impressive to have the performance he's had. And then I think you're seeing them tied, and this makes sense. You're seeing them tied to a lot of offensive minds from continuing this trend of more wide zone play action offenses. So you're seeing Kevin O'Connell, the Rams offensive coordinator, another McVay guy. Last OC to get hired under McVay was Matt LaFleur. He turned out pretty well, I would say. And then you're seeing the 49ers offensive coordinator, Mike McDaniel. I don't think the Vikings have officially requested him for an interview, but I think the Dolphins have, and I think a couple other teams are rumored to be interested in him. So I wouldn't be surprised if they brought him in for an interview. Mike McDaniel also, interestingly, an Ivy League guy who will kind of found his path into the NFL. So there would be some alignment there, and they could probably catch up on old Ivy League games together. There's the
sit in the cigar room.
Yeah. Speaking of Matt LaFleur, Nathaniel Hackett's another hot name. Another one of those. LaFleur is kind of his own branch of the McVay Shanahan tree, but they were all together in Washington in 2013. So Nathaniel Hackett, the Packers offensive coordinator, very highly regarded. I think he'd be a really interesting name too. The thing in common with all those guys is they all kind of would want to implement the same variation of the same scheme, which I think the Vikings offense is really set up to do right now. Don't get me wrong, I love who's the Buccaneers offensive coordinator, Leftwich. I really like what that offense does, but the Vikings aren't set up to go back to a Norv Turner, Eric Coryell offense where they just don't. Their offensive linemen are too skinny and too small, but they're really quick. So we can continue to build off of the wide zone stuff. So I think it makes sense for them to look at someone like that. So I don't know. There's a lot of names out there this year. There's no number one guy with a bullet. When Kyle Shanahan was hired, everybody kind of knew he was the most attractive head coaching candidate because he would be really good. This year, it isn't the same thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's there aren't any good guys out there because we didn't know Matt LaFleur was going to be amazing and have an 80% win percentage when they hired him. When they hired him, Aaron Rodgers was is he still good anymore? And now even asking that question sounds pretty stupid coming off back-to-back MVP. Or Sean McVay, people had no idea how good of a head coach he would be. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with this. And obviously it's the most important decision. It is the first decision they have to make is who to hire. And so hopefully they take their time with it and think it through. But I do, of all those names, I'd be pretty happy with any of them. And obviously there's all the other names you've seen, Dan Quinn or Todd Bowles or some of the other retreads, head coaches. So they could go a lot of different directions. I wouldn't be as excited about those names, although I do think Todd Bowles has done a good job as a coordinator in Tampa. But all those guys I mentioned, from the 49ers, Rams, or Packers, I think have all done a good job. So would all be good fits. And
they're all connected to Adofo-Mensah in one way or another.
Yeah, small.
All of them, all those guys you just mentioned. With the Niners and O'Connell he was with the Niners 1 year, and what was it? Mike McDaniel from 17 to 19. He was with the Niners. I think he was the offensive coordinator there. Even Vic Fangio worked with Adofo-Mensah for a couple of years, I do believe, with the Niners way back when, 2014 or something. But not that I want Fangio as my head coach, but
I'll take him as defensive coordinator.
All those.
I would take Fangio as a head coach. That's probably a hot take, but I think
no, that's a scorching take.
Yeah. But
thanks, Nick. It's been fun, but you got to go now. I'm sorry.
D'Amico Ryans was 17 to 19 with the Niners also, so they're all connected in a way. I mean, it's good to have a little bit of familiarity with it. But who do you think it's going to be, Nick? Shoot us out, and you got to pick a name here. Come on. Give us a head coach. Give us one.
I feel like Raheem Morris makes the most sense. Because he's a former head coach who has experience. His first run at Tampa, it didn't go well, but he was really young. But I think the Wilfs, are going to be very focused on coming out of some of the downswing of the Zimmer era is like we saw that like there was a little bit of a culture failing, and there was poor communication between the general manager and the head coach. And I think Raheem Morris is a very nice salve, very nice balance to all that, because he's like a player's coach who everybody loves. Everybody wants to run through a wall with him. He's a very good communicator. He's a good hype guy. People compare him a lot to Mike Tomlin. I think they coached together for a while. So in addition to being like, he was Kyle Shanahan's passing game coordinator in Atlanta, in addition to being, now currently a defensive coordinator. So he's kind of got like a unique balance of things where I feel like he's a defensive guy, but he brings offensive value because he's coached that side of the ball and he understands the passing game because he's coached he's come up with like play designs for the passing game. So and on top of like being a guy who you would really trust to build a player's culture and be a player's coach in Minnesota. So I feel like he might make the most sense, but they could go any direction. I think Nathaniel Hackett probably makes a lot of sense too. So
Drew, who do you think it is?
No, I think it's Raheem Morris.
Chris, who do you think?
I still kind of think that D'Amico Ryans is going to end up in the big chair here somehow. I mean, I know he's a defensive guy, but I think he's one of those coaches that could probably attract a younger offensive mind to kind of be one of the next innovators on that side of the ball. So, yeah, I think D'Amico Ryans would make the most sense from my perspective, and the connections with Adofo-Mensah, obviously.
Nick, you brought up a good point. You brought up the name Mike Tomlin, and I've seen on Twitter and heard from a couple of people that the Wilfs want to find their Mike Tomlin, and they crave continuity, and we saw them give Zimmer a lot of leeway, 8 years. Same with Spielman, 10 years as sole GM. And they feel, I think in retrospect, they let Tomlin get out of the building when they shouldn't have, because he was the Vikings defense coordinator in 2006, Brad Childress's first year. And I think they regret letting him go. And I think they want to find either in D'Amico, and I think it's either going to be either D'Amico Ryans or Raheem Morris. And I would go with D'Amico Ryans, because if you look at his resume right now compared to when Mike Tomlin took over for the Steelers back in 2007, it's pretty similar. He doesn't have a lot of run as a full-time defensive coordinator. I think he's got a little bit more experience than Tomlin, but he kind of came up through the same way as position coach at the lower levels in college and in the NFL. So that's just my personal opinion, but take that for what it's worth. The one thing, and I want to hit on this, and I brought up Adofo-Mensah's background in finance and the cap and everything else, and we brought up Kirk Cousins before we brought up Baker Mayfield, so this is kind of the perfect time. I think one of the main reasons Adofo-Mensah was hired, this GM was hired, was to handle the Kirk Cousins situation, much like the Bonnie situation in Pulp Fiction, but not nearly as dire. He has to decide whether to extend Kirk or whether to trade Kirk. Now, I'm not saying his connections to Cleveland, who has Kevin Stefanski as his head coach, worked very well with Kirk Cousins when Stefanski was the OC, facilitate that. But I think his salary cap knowledge, working with Rob Brzezinski to get the Vikings a manageable number for next year, played a big part of it, because it's gonna have to be a very complicated deal to trade Kirk Cousins, because I don't think a lot of teams are going to want to take his entire cap hit, which is it 45 or 35 million?
45 million, but 35 million salary that would be cleared if they traded. So
okay, so is that kind of a crazy thought in my head, or is this going, if they decide to trade Kirk, and I'm not saying they are, is it going to be a complicated deal from the financial part to get him off the books, or part of his salary, like a 60-40 split, 50-50 split, whatever they can try to do? Is that going to be a complicated thing for the Vikings to do?
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be part of the conversation. I think there are a lot of teams that would love to have Kirk Cousins at their quarterback, but the list of teams that would love to have Kirk Cousins out there as their quarterback for $35 million next year is probably a little bit slower, or a little bit shorter, or at the very least, like maybe you get a first round pick if you're willing to pay $10 million of the salary, convert 35 million, 10 million of that into a bonus so that the next team only takes 25 million. Maybe you get a first rounder plus for that. Whereas if you're just offering Kirk Cousins at $35 million, maybe the best offer you get is Kirk for a 2 or something, which is not nearly as enticing. So it's complicated, and it would depend on who the trade partner is. Like before Sean Payton retired, I would have thought Kirk Cousins, he would love to have Kirk Cousins, because Kirk is kind of like a discount Drew Brees in a lot of ways. But but like the Saints are $70 million over the cap, so that would be a tricky thing to figure out. They always find a way, so they probably could figure out a way to make it work, but it'd just be tricky. There are teams that like. It's funny, but like George Payton was a big Kirk Cousins guy, was pounding the table for Kirk back when they signed him in 2018 because they thought at the time that the Vikings roster, they just made the NFC Championship game with Case Keenum as their quarterback. So if you plug just a good, not great, but just a good quarterback, you can probably take that roster to the Super Bowl. That was the logic, and it didn't work out, but I don't think it was necessarily because of Cousins. It was because of John DeFilippo, and then we had like Jake Long starting at left tackle because everybody was dying. So there are a lot of problems with that 2018 team that like caused things to like fall off at the end. But like you look at the Broncos team right now, I think they. It's a funny phrase we use a lot, but I really do think they're a quarterback away. Like they've got so many young, talented wide receivers, good offensive linemen. The defense is stacked. They hit really hard on Patrick Surtain in the draft. So I think they're ready to go, I think. So, and then like the Stefanski connection to Cleveland makes so much sense. Like you just think about like Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback who with his quick decision-making and his accuracy can really execute a team, but it would help a lot for him to have a good offensive coordinator because like he's a little bit of a robot that he'll follow the instructions as programmed. And if Kyle Shanahan is his play caller in Washington or whatever, he like does a really good job. But if John DeFilippo is his play caller, he like the offense, you kind of get what you put in with him. So having a great schemer like Kevin Stefanski I think that helps. And the other thing is like Kirk Cousins is great when he can be on time and from a clean pocket. You get him under pressure and he's not able to do what we just saw last weekend with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. So, but you put him in Cleveland, which has arguably the best offensive line in the NFL. I don't know. I think it makes a lot of sense. And Cleveland does have the cap space for something like that. And you look at the rest of that offense, you look at the rest of that roster. They got Myles Garrett. They got a lot of guys on the defense. They got a phenomenal offensive line. It's not like a perfect roster. They could probably use more wide receivers after losing Odell Beckham. But like, that's a team that I feel like you could also make the argument is a quarterback away. And given all the connections, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah coming from Cleveland, Kevin Stefanski coming from Minnesota, I feel like there's going to be bidders. It's going to, and given that it's like not a great draft for quarterbacks this year, like I think there's going to be bidders for Kirk Cousins, even though, he's not Carson Wentz or Matthew Stafford. Like people knock him in the media and people understand that he's probably not as good as his stats say. I still think the Vikings are probably going to have bidders if they choose to want to go on from him, which I think they will. That's a whole nother question, but like because they could have him play out his contract or they could extend him. They probably won't let him play out his contract because then they would just have to pay the full cap hit and they wouldn't get anything in return. Like I think they would get like the maximum of a fifth as a comp pick because he's like a 10-year vested veteran. So the comp pick rules are different for him. So you would basically get nothing for letting him walk. But there's always the argument that like, yeah, Kirk Cousins isn't great, but like the 10th best quarterback in the NFL is a heck of a lot better than having the 25th best quarterback in the NFL or whatever. So there are arguments both ways. It'll be really interesting to see what they do there. But I do think if they do want to move on from him, there are a lot of people that make a lot of sense and a lot of teams that I honestly think, as much as Kirk Cousins has limitations, I think there are other places where he could really thrive and they would have a supporting cast to do like a little bit better with him than the Vikings have been able to the last few years.
Does analytics support Kirk Cousins' game or not? Because I've seen like when I was discussing this on Twitter today, more than one person had said, well, analytics favors Kirk. So Kirk's staying then. Because I mentioned, look, the Vikings are going to have to do this with Kirk, either trade or extend. So what do the analytics say about Kirk as a quarterback? Is he the right guy for this team? Does the new GM think he will be the right fit, or what do you think that side of the ball tells, or can it forecast what Adofo-Mensah might do as the GM?
Yeah, it's interesting because analytics isn't like a monolith. Like there isn't like the council of analytics that decides how good Kirk Cousins is. Like,
but there's certain sets of stats. I mean, there's certain types of stats that analytics guys prefer as an indicator of future success, right?
I think advanced stats and analytics will tell you that Kirk Cousins is he's probably more talented than the general consensus opinion would have, but there's something about him that causes his overall efficiency numbers to be lower than what you would expect, given the other things that he does really well at. Like the advanced charting of his ball location and his accuracy suggests he's like one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. But maybe he has a little bit below average arm strength compared to the average NFL start. He's still got good arm strength, but compared to everybody's got a rocket arm these days. He's maybe a little bit more like he's not quite Derek Carr, to say nothing of Matthew Stafford. So the skill set he has suggests like he's a pocket passer who is he's not Tom Brady, so he's like the next step down of pocket passers. So he's able to put up take his Pro Football Focus grades. Like, he doesn't make many mistakes with the football. That's probably the best thing you can say about him is he doesn't throw interceptions. He's one of the best in the NFL at avoiding turnover worthy plays. I mean, he's even gotten better at avoiding strip sacks this year, and his pocket presence has improved incrementally every year in the NFL to the point where now I think, I wouldn't say he's elite at it or anything, but I don't think he's bad at it anymore. So, which he used to be really bad. I don't know if any of you guys watched a lot of his Washington tape, but he was awful in Washington there. So,
well, I thought his first year in Minnesota, he was iffy at best too.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, the offensive line was terrible and banged up that year, but yeah, he wasn't great. So but the problem is he doesn't make mistakes, but he also doesn't generate enough positive plays. He lacks the sort of downfield aggression or tight window aggression that he doesn't make, what Pro Football Focus would call, big time throw. Like, he will absolutely take your CJ Ham in the check down when Justin Jefferson is open 20 yards downfield. So, right. And that's kind of the problem with Kirk Cousins. That's probably why I think the tape buffs and the football guys probably don't love him as much. I do think he's probably somewhere between. He's not a top 5 quarterback, and I think he's probably in the top 15 in the NFL. So somewhere in that range. And where you fall on that depends on how good is your offensive line, how good is your scheme, because Kirk Cousins can be a little robotic. He's not going to be able to improvise very well. So. It's tough, and it depends on which sort of advanced stats or analytics you're looking at. His PFF grade suggests, he was like the 5th highest graded quarterback in the NFL this year, which is a little surprising. His EPA per play, which is just a measure of total overall offensive efficiency, I think it was 14th or something, which is marginally above average. So something about there doesn't quite add up. And I think a big part of it is Kirk Cousins, his passer rating is always phenomenal because he throws a catchable ball and he's quick and he gets it out on time. But he's not always throwing the ball downfield. So you can have a very good passer rating when you go 3 and out. It's kind of the conundrum. So Vikings went 3 and out a lot this year. So yeah. I just feel like he doesn't generate enough positive plays on his own. And that's kind of why some of his stats ring hollow. And I think people kind of get that too. He puts up very impressive stats. And I think most people would agree he's a good quarterback. He's not a bad quarterback. It's just a question of if you have a guy who is going to turn, punt, you're going to result in so many offenses punting the ball so often. Can you win with somebody like that being paid one of the highest salaries in the NFL? So a long-winded way of saying depends on your stats. He's a good quarterback, not a great quarterback.
What did you want to ask? You had your hand up.
I just wanted to get his opinion on, who he's a better quarterback than in my eyes? Jimmy G. Now, I have a question for you. How is Jimmy G in the Niners in the NFC title game when you look at the weapons straight down the roster? I know the Niners have a better defense, but how are the Niners all the way to where they're at when you look at the quarterback position? I don't think he's as good as Cousins. Do you? I mean, how have they worked? And they're in a tougher division than the Vikings, in my eyes. How the hell did they get further than us?
Kyle Shanahan, man.
Is it that? I was going to say, defense and coaching. Is it really that much of it? This is kind of shocking to me. If you look at the rosters, look at the quarterback we didn't even make the playoffs, and they're 1 game from the ball.
This is why Shanahan is in love with Kirk Cousins, and that's always talking about oh man, and there's always the Kyle Shanahan trade rumor. Even when he had Jimmy G, there were the Kyle Shanahan trade rumors, and it's just because Cousins, if you want a robot and you are such a good schemer that all you need is the guy to just go out and do the play, do his job and execute. And that's not a sexy thing, but when you're Kyle Shanahan or you're, just an offensive genius, just having a guy who will do what you tell him to do and execute it perfectly and is able to do it is really, really valuable. So, Jimmy Garoppolo he does do a lot of things pretty well. But he's probably even worse than Kirk when it comes to Kirk. Kirk gets the ball out. I wouldn't say faster because Jimmy G has an amazing release, but Kirk processes the field more quickly and doesn't his Jimmy G's problem is like if the play doesn't go as he planned, or if he's forced to hold on to the ball for 3 seconds, like disaster strikes. So Kirk Cousins doesn't make dumb decisions when he has to hold on to the ball. Maybe he'll turtle up, but he doesn't necessarily make bad decisions. So Kirk is a better player, but like that's kind of the beauty of Kyle Shanahan is it's not just he'll take Debo, he'll take Kittle, he'll take Juszczyk. And he'll take like all these offensive linemen he has, and he'll be able to scheme just like amazing stuff and get guys downfield. Like Clint Kubiak and Andrew Janocko this year talked about like how, we talk about like why are we targeting guys short of the sticks on third downs? Well, the reason they do it is because they saw that the 49ers do it, and the 49ers are able to like design plays where they throw short of the sticks but have like one of the league's best third down conversion rates.
But like Juszczyk is, I love CJ Ham. Don't get me wrong. But he's no Juszczyk. And Tyler Conklin is not George Kittle. I mean, Justin Jefferson is as good as or better than Deebo Samuel. I think that, but I would argue Deebo Samuel is more versatile. I
agree with all that, Ted, but there's also the similarities between teams where one shouldn't make it to the title game and the other one doesn't even make the playoffs. It doesn't seem like it should be a little more equal than that.
Yeah. Well,
I understand the roster that you're saying, Ted. I totally agree with you.
I think the other thing here is like, it's a really talented offensive roster. I think totally like, Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, like you go down the line, Kirk Cousins, these are Pro Bowlers, and CJ Ham too. It's a really talented roster. And we're getting Irv Smith back too next year. So it's a really talented team. I think the problem is Clint Kubiak was a first year play caller and, was pretty green and showed that a lot of times too. So when you have like arguably the best offensive play caller in the NFL versus a first-year guy who's probably pretty below average coming in. I mean, maybe the book isn't written on Clint Kubiak, and maybe he'll get another shot down the line. He might develop into something, but like just comparing like a good offensive coordinator makes. I mean, we saw that this was the difference between it was the same offense in 2018 and 2019, same personnel, like down other than like they added Josh Klein or something, but like it was pretty much the same offense 2018, 2019. But in 2018 they had John DeFilippo, and they go 8-7-8 or something, and then the next year. It's Kevin Stefanski, and with Kevin Stefanski, they win a playoff game. So that's the difference between having a really good offensive coordinator and a really bad one. So.
Okay, I just wanted to run that by and get your take on that.
So, Nick, this has been great stuff. I got one question. You're all going to answer it. And Chris, you said like 3 words all night, so you're going to answer this. You're going to answer this question first.
I'm trying to learn, man.
I'm telling you, this has been great.
I'm yakking all your ears off. I apologize.
No, this is great stuff, man.
It's cool. Me is dumb. I need to learn stuff. This is totally acceptable.
I learned a lot tonight too.
So with all the info we've gotten from Nick tonight, Chris, is Kirk Cousins going to be on the roster in 2022?
Yes.
I love it.
I gotta say, it's going to depend on who your market is. Like Nick was talking about, who's willing to absorb more of the salary cap hit, what you can potentially get for it. Because you don't want to go like the full Brock Osweiler, where you're like literally paying someone to take the guy off your hands, but you're not going to get like a Matthew Stafford kind of return for him either. So if I had to pick one or the other, I'm going to probably end up saying no. And if that happens, then you're probably locked into a quarterback in this year's draft and finding somebody like a bridge guy to start for a year and take over. But if I had to say right now, given that Nick seems to think there's going to be a market for him, I'm going to have to say probably not.
Drew, you're going to trade him. They're going to work a deal with Cleveland. Mayfield's going to end up here.
You think so?
Probably not. But that makes for good. That makes for good radio. People probably going, what? What did you just say? I don't know. Man, that's a good question. I'm going to say no. I'm going to go at pretty much everything Chris just said. I think they're going to try to move him. I don't think it'll be an easy thing, but I think he's still part of that gloom, man. And I think you're still trying to work yourself through that Zimmer, Spielman, Cousins, all tied together gloom that you had. I think he's the last part of the gloom, and I don't think he'll be here.
I personally, I would put that on my resume if I was going to. I was the last part of gloom. Minnesota Vikings. Nick, time to put you on the spot. Is Kirk Cousins going to be on the Minnesota Vikings in 2022?
With the caveat that an extension totally wouldn't surprise me. I think right now, if you sold Kirk, you're selling low on him, so maybe they do try and keep him. And he is a good quarterback. That said, I think it will be a buyer's market. I think there are a lot of teams that, whether it's Pittsburgh, who with Ben retiring, or Denver, who with Drew Lock not being the answer, or there's a lot of dominoes shop. Washington, another team that you could argue is a quarterback away. I do think there's going to be a big market for Cousins, and if you look at this roster, and it's not really ready to contend. You look at all the guys getting older and stuff. I mean, if they get lucky and everybody stays healthy, anything can happen. But like, if you're honest with yourself, this isn't a team like that's going to become a perennial contender anytime soon. Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback, but he's not going to carry the team on his back into a Super Bowl. So you look at all that, and I do think, do you prefer to have Kirk Cousins at $45 million, or do you prefer to get a first round pick, $20 million, see what you have in Kellen Mond, or bring in a Jameis Winston, bring in a, one of those bridge type quarterbacks, and go from there. I do think the latter option probably sounds more desirable, especially for a first year GM, first year head coach, as they sort of hit the reset button a little bit. And I do think with Kirk Cousins, like, he's a good quarterback. There's a lot of, it wasn't like a disaster or anything. I do think he did a good job in Minnesota, but it's kind of just time for change and everything. And I don't think if you're gonna move on from the GM, you're gonna move on from the head coach. It probably makes sense to move on from the quarterback, who was, just as much as the GM and the head coach, part of the problems with the last few years in Minnesota, being good, not great, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. So I just think it makes a lot of sense for all parties involved to start a new chapter.
I think he is going to get traded because, unlike you, Nick, I do believe there is a council of analytics, and Adofo-Mensah has consulted with the council of analytics, and they have said, you must move Kirk. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's damn good right there.
Where's the council of analytics headquartered? I want to go.
Simi Valley, California.
They have a big table. It's made out of stone. Hats.
That's right down the road. I got
Simi Valley.
I don't know.
Simi Valley.
It's either that or some warehouse outside of Joplin, Missouri. Either one. I could go either way.
Nice.
All right, Nick, we got a couple things to discuss, but we will let you go. Thank you so much for coming on. You made us all a lot smarter. You taught some old dogs some new tricks, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about analytics and making us not so scared about this new change, because change is bad for old guys like us. And even though, like you said, it may end up being an epic disaster, it's going to be a hell of a fun ride either way. I'm really excited about the new direction. I am excited about the direction the Wilfs decided to go, because I was afraid, and Drew and I and Chris have all talked about it, that we were afraid the Wilfs would just stay safe and go with like another Spielman type guy, or redo the structure and make somebody report to Spielman and essentially become Spielman's yes man. And that didn't happen. And I'm fired up. I hope, and I know you're excited about it. At least I hope you are.
Yeah, no, they're swinging for the fences with this one. That's like what I said. So, if it fails, it'll fail in spectacularly entertaining Vikings fashion, Love Boat style maybe. And if it succeeds, then it's going to succeed big. So I love it. I'm excited.
Either way, Nick, in 3 years, people are going to be like running around. Get the analytics guy. We got to do what the Vikings did. Get the analytics. Go. Come on, get him.
If we could get some analytics on the Love Boat, I'd appreciate that. I'm not sure what kind of metrics you'd be measuring there, but yeah.
You find those metrics on the Playboy channel at 2:00 in the morning.
Hey Nick Olson. I also heard the Jake Long comment a little while ago. I don't even know if you know the rules of this show, but there'll be no throwing the Wolverines under the bus. I caught it.
Stepping on a landmine. Can't talk about Ohio State. Can't talk about Wolverines. That's like half the NFL he just eliminated. God,
I feel so much smart. It's great having you on. You got to come on here again, man. Make us all smart again.
My pleasure. Anytime. It's been a blast.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, Nick. Take care, buddy.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah. See you, Nick.
All right.
Holy cow, that was awesome.
Was that not awesome?
Hell yeah.
Woo!
The one of the reasons I thought it was a good idea, or we all thought it was a good idea for him to be honest, because change can be bad. I'm very much, I've lived my life as a change is bad guy. But this change, I feel, is really good for the Minnesota Vikings. They needed a complete cultural shift. They needed somebody that is not like a guy people are afraid of to talk to. And along with all the analytics stuff, I'm just talking about Adofo-Mensah, the person. He just seems like a dude that is going to come in and take the input from every department, whether it's traditional scouting, whether it's from analytics, whether it's from Brzezinski, the finance guy, and go get a consensus instead of saying, you know what, you get me this guy or don't get me a guy at all, which is kind of like what Zimmer was doing at the end with Spielman.
This is trend setting, guys. I'm being serious when I say in 3 years, we want people scrambling to copy what we did. That means we did something good.
If it works.
Absolutely.
But
yeah,
man, this is that dude, Nick Olson. That is one smart dude right there.
Yeah, it is.
That's
absolutely.
very good idea having him on the show. Thank you for doing that, Ted, and arranging all that. That was all you, buddy.
I'm feeling. Yeah. I was very intrigued by Adofo-Mensah when these names started popping out and everything, and I was kind of excited about this guy. And Drew, like you had said, I think you mentioned it before we came on the air. 5 years ago, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's resume doesn't even get him an interview based on what he's done up in the NFL till right
I don't
now.
think it does. Or Catherine Raish. I don't think she does either.
Raish. Poles is very much like, like Nick said, the traditional guy that was a player, got into scouting, did the job, the scouting grind on the road, evaluating players, looking at millions of hours of tape and working his way up, from a assistant scout to regional scout to head scout to whatever, and got this job. And this is a very different thing the Minnesota Vikings have done. I'm not saying it's bad at all. I'm just saying this is very different, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in free agency and in the draft and things coming up for the Vikings in the next few years. Chris, what are you thinking about this whole deal?
Yeah.
No, like Nick said, this is something that's either going to be a spectacular success or it's going to be a gigantic catastrophic failure. Either way, I mean, we're going to be entertained. Hell, if nothing else, we're going to be entertained by it. But it's definitely, I know we've kind of panned analytics from time to time on this show and whatnot, but this is the direction the National Football League is going in, and so it's better, like you said, to be kind of leading the way rather than trying to be one of the guys who 2 or 3 years after the fact says, yeah, we want to do what those guys are doing, because by that time that the people who made the innovation in the first place are innovating and doing something else different that you're going to try to copy 2 or 3 years down the track again. So it's nice to potentially be the leader in something like this for a change rather than trying to play catch up later on.
I have a question for you, Chris Gates.
Sure.
They got the combine coming up next month, and then we're going to have the free agency will start, and then the big war room preparation for the draft. All that combined together, do you think there's going to be somebody else that comes in, more of a, I don't want to say more of a football mind, but you know what I mean, to cover that end of it to help Adofo-Mensah out? Or is it going to be stuck all alone covering all the areas I just mentioned? I'm kind of thinking there's going to be some kind of advisor guy or something.
I mean, there's been some rumors floating around out there that Catherine Raish, who was one of the people that interviewed for the GM job, is being courted to be an assistant GM.
Oh, really?
Kind of like the right hand person to Adofo-Mensah at this point. And she has, like we touched on in previous shows, she was an assistant GM in the CFL, and she's actually been more into the kind of scouting side of things. So if that happens, I mean, that might be part of it. And the Vikings have some solid guys in place. I don't know if they're planning on, keeping guys like a Jamal Stevenson or people who are already there, but I'm sure there's going to be, he's going to have an opportunity to put together who he feels comfortable with and who's kind of on the same page. I mean, it's not just communication between the head coach and the general manager or whatnot. It's the general manager and everybody in the general manager's kind of orbit, I guess. So yeah, he's going to have an opportunity to get people he's comfortable with, and people that might have experience that kind of complements things he might not be as savvy at.
Okay.
One thing I saw earlier, I think it was Chad Graff from The Athletic. It might have been Will Ragatz from USA Today. Might have been one of their tweet quoting the other guy's story. I'm not sure. But they said Adofo-Mensah wants to keep the scouting department as it is, largely intact. Jamal Stevenson is the head of, I believe, college scouting. Yeah. and he is going to keep doing what they're doing. They're not going to abandon what they've been doing. The scouts are that they're going to incorporate more stuff. And the thing with Adofo-Mensah that I find so exciting is that he's going to take the information the scouts give him. They're going to meet with the Council of Analytics, which I firmly 100% believe exists, and kind of come to a consensus whereas we didn't see that in the last few years. It was Zimmer saying to Spielman, go get me a guy that can do this in the 40 and this in the 3-cone time, and I don't care about anything else.
Wasn't it good music to your ears to hear Nick when Nick was talking about collaboration?
Yes.
He's open-minded.
Yes.
He wants to hear other people's ideas, and he wants to throw it all on the table. He wants to work with everyone. I'm just sitting here going, yes,
right.
Finally, a guitar player that won't solo when I'm trying to talk.
And
I got a head coaching question for Simi Valley Smitty, though.
Oh, what do you got, brother?
By the way, you are getting a chair at Simi Valley. You earned it. No, that was a great find getting Nick Olson on. I really appreciate that. Every once in a while, we need knowledgeable guys in the show because I ain't one of them. Do you think the head coach, being the Mensah, it's new. It's new for him. Everything's new for him.
Yes.
You think they're not going to even look at guys like a Fangio, guys that have been, they don't want that attitude coming in that I've done it, I've been there. Do you think they want to go new with the head coach? Being that Mensah's new, do they want to keep new and new and new? What's your take on that?
With the head coach or the head coach?
Yeah, with the head coach.
Oh, I think they want a new guy. I think part of the and I meant to ask Nick this about the current Viking staff that are under contract. I wonder how many guys are going to stay. And people are saying Andre Patterson's got to stay and all this. Andre Patterson's kind of an old school guy, and he kind of came up and grew up and served with Mike Zimmer and all that stuff. I would think if the Vikings keep anybody on the staff, and we've talked about this a little bit before, I would think Keenan McCardell and Ryan Ficken, the special teams coach. They're younger, more high energy guys, and I really think the Wilfs are going to give Adofo-Mensah a lot of latitude in hiring. I don't want to say unproven guys because that's the incorrect word. I'm going to say young guys with maybe not as big of a track record as a guy like Vic Fangio. Because go ahead.
No, here's the comparison I want to throw at you. DeMeco Ryans, never been a head coach, compared to Raheem Morris, who's been a head coach. Do you really have to have that? Does the experience outweigh DeMeco Ryans, who could be the next Tomlin? That's where I'm kind of coming from. Being that Mensah's a brand new GM, does he want a brand new head coach or somebody like Morris that has that experience? What would you vote? Both you guys, what would you weigh either way?
Here's me. When I was first started flying and I was a co-pilot and I came into a unit at the same time with a whole bunch of other co-pilots. We were young and stupid, didn't know any better. We learned together. We started flying together, flying on missions. And then we became aircraft commanders. And it was really cool to go on a mission with the guy I had been to flight school with 3 years ago. And I'm like the air mission commander and the guys that are behind me, I went to flight school with 3 years ago, and we kind of all grew up together. And now we're flying these missions and doing all that kind of stuff. And I'm telling you that there is a huge, powerful draw in that. And I'm not football aside, whatever. I'm just talking human emotions. If you're on a team or an organization with a guy and you come in at roughly the same time and you both kind of start at the bottom and start working your way up, it's really cool when you get to a place where you're kind of in charge for a little bit. And I'm telling you, that's going to be a powerful draw. And it would not surprise me at all if a guy like DeMeco Ryans becomes the Vikings head coach. And I would love it, because if you want the next Tomlin, you got to take a chance. I think Raheem Morris is kind of a safe bet. He's got a track record, previous head coach. I think, like Nick mentioned when he was on with us, that his track record in Tampa Bay had a lot going against him. He didn't have a very good team, didn't have a very good roster. He was really young, and he didn't get a whole lot of support. I would look at what he did in Atlanta as the interim coach. I thought he did pretty well. He got that team playing a hell of a lot harder for him than they were playing for Dan Quinn when Dan Quinn got fired.
So is Mensah, do you have big enough nuts to take a chance on a guy who's never done it, or does he need that safety blanket with Raheem Morris? That's the question.
I think he goes with Ryans, man. I mean, like the
I
Vikings.
would love to see that, man. I
would too. I mean, what the hell? In for a penny, in for a pound. Let's go, Chris. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree with Ted. I mean, you're not going to bring in the young hot shot 40-year-old GM and whatever, and then go, all right, here's a guy who was a head coach somewhere else in the past that didn't do very. No, you're going to want to try to bring in another coach that's young and exciting and gets people fired up, and whether that's DeMeco Ryans, whether it's Kevin O'Connell, whoever the case may be. I don't know how old Nathaniel Hackett is. I'm not sure about that, but no, I don't think we're going to get one of these kind of retread type head coaches that the Vikings have interviewed. I think they're going to go out and get another younger guy to kind of keep the thing going that they have with Adofo-Mensah at this point.
I want to say one more thing about the Ryan Poles, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah thing. A lot of Bears fans are chirping on social media that they stole Justin Fields from the Vikings last year, and then they stole Ryan Poles from the Vikings as GM. You know who the Bears are interviewing for their head coaching position tomorrow? If not today, it might have happened today. It doesn't get much more than Goodyear retread than Dan Quinn and Jim Caldwell. I'm telling you right now, if Ryan Poles' first hire is Dan Quinn or Jim Caldwell, he is completely disregarding his young type franchise type quarterback and not getting to like a Nathaniel Hackett, which is the direction I would think they'd go.
Rex Ryan wasn't available.
Right? Is Rex Ryan not available?
Brad Childress.
What's Rich Kotite doing? Is he around? Can he coach still? If that's his first major decision, the Vikings won this. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah, they dodged a bullet. I just want to point out that the proverbial purple smoke is now officially coming from the Vikings Twitter account. That they have officially signed him, complete with a picture complete with a picture of him in a Viking shirt holding a pen, signing his new contract. So it is officially official.
It's live. It's live on the air.
Because when all the purple smoke clears, Ted, chicks can't hold their smoke.
That's what it is.
They can't. That's what it is.
Now,
if can't hold they, I got a good little tidbit on your flight school thing.
Yeah,
this fits right into what you were saying. Which very good analogy, by the way. Very, very good. Simi Valley.
Simi Valley.
DeMeco Ryan's got his coaching start as a defensive quality control coach, which is low. That's bottom of the rung, man.
Yeah.
Quality control coach with the 49ers in 2017. Mensah had just been promoted to director of football research and development in the San Francisco front office the same time Ryan's got his job there.
So he started at the bottom of the 49ers front office at the same time Ryan started at the bottom of the coaching rung.
And they spent 3 seasons together going through that flight school that you just talked about, Ted.
Yeah.
So they went through that. Your example just worked into my tidbit. Things are going well on this show.
I'm telling you, when you're on the bottom and you're grinding with dudes that are right there with you. The few times you've got a minute for yourself, you're at the smoke pit, you're having a beer, whatever. You're gonna be like, man, someday we're gonna be in charge of this bitch, and we're gonna get to do it our way. There's some good stuff that we had. I had, and I'm not saying I didn't have good mentors and leaders. I did, but you always want to prove yourself when you get the opportunity. And I'm telling you, that is a powerful draw. And I would not be surprised if DeMeco Ryans gets this job.
And that connection I just mentioned, those guys were at bottom together in the same organization. They weren't out front leading anything.
So it's officially official. Now, if this were the Catholic Football League, the official announcement would be Habemus GM. And purple smoke comes. Well, maybe it's Habemus. I'm actually Missouri Synod Lutheran, which is like Catholic light. Habemus GM. We have a GM. We have a general manager.
Mint State Lutheran? What was that?
Missouri Synod, man.
Of course. Missouri
Synod. Hardcore. That's hardcore. That's kind of why I am what I am. Hard school. Old school hardcore. That was long enough.
Did we find out if Nick Olson was related to Mary Kate and Ashley? Because they were going to be on next show, right?
Didn't ask. Their publicist never got back with me, but Nick, Johnny on the spot.
Nick Olson, what a great, you guys, this was a great show today. I learned a lot, learned quite a bit.
Absolutely.
That was some great info. Again, Nick, if you're still watching or whatever, thanks so much for joining us. I learned a lot about Adofo-Mensah and what we can expect. And I think I don't think it's going to fail spectacular. I think analytics has worked its way enough into the NFL that people are more open to it than like when Billy Beane did it in Oakland. And Billy Beane did it for financial reasons. I mean, the A's could not compete financially with teams like the Yankees and the Red Sox.
Oh, and David Justice, we can't get David Justice. His legs are gone.
because
he gets on base though. He gets on base.
There's no salary cap in baseball, and so I think this could be like the best of both worlds if it's done right, because you got guys you can look for in a kind of a different way while still blending the traditional scouting means, working for a coaching staff that's on board with what this team is trying to do. Man, I don't look, it could fall apart. It could be an epic disaster. It could. Sure, it could.
So on my prediction sheet, I can write down for both of you. You're on board with Mensah.
Yeah.
And you're on board with DeMeco Ryans, all three of us?
Yes.
Hell yeah.
That's our Vikings report choice. You guys watching out there, you can hold us to it. That's our head coach of choice that we have tonight, Ted.
Yep, that's who we got. So
that's it.
All right, gentlemen. Well, we've been online long enough. It's now actually official.
Yep.
Wow.
Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is now officially the Minnesota Vikings general manager per the Minnesota Vikings Twitter account. Nice picture of him signing his contract and everything else. This is
really cool.
This has been a good day, man.
Don't make me change his name to a Dofool in 2 years. Don't make me do it, because that's where I'm going with it. Now, I hope he comes in with the confidence, but the fact that he's open-minded and wants to collaborate. He's not like Rick Spielman had that used car salesman thing, Chris. He did.
He did.
He had that used car. When he stood at the podium, it was a used car salesman attitude. I saw right through it.
I mean, you're looking at the guy over on the other side of the camera that actually did a column called Rick Speak for years over at DN, where he would actually take what Rick Spielman said at press conference and, okay, this is what he was saying, this is what he actually meant, because Ted is fluent in Rick Speak. So that was
he is very much.
And to continue your used car analysis or analogy even farther, if Rick is the used car salesman, Mike Zimmer was like the 60-year-old dude that wanted $20,000 off his brand new truck, and I'm not walking out of here paying a penny more than $26,000. Now you name your manager. Tell him that's my offer.
Oh man, the Bears bringing in retreads. I love it, man.
I'm telling you, man. If that's Poles' first hire, then
we dodged the bullet.
It kind of. It's premature, but like Nick mentioned, he came up in the traditional NFL world of scouting, grinding the tape, all that kind of stuff, moving up in the scouting department, now getting a shot. And those guys, that's a formula. There's a formula for success there. And the formula for success for those guys is to get tried and true NFL dudes. And Dan Quinn, I mean, Jim Caldwell's a good coach. He made Detroit a good football team. He got them to the playoffs, I think, 2 out of 4 years. Was an above 500 record. And that's no small feat for Detroit. Dan Quinn got the Falcons to the Super Bowl. But man, if you're going to do this for your GM hire, I don't think you can fall back to like a guy like Dan Quinn. I think it just sort of takes a little bit of the air out of the balloon.
No, I don't think it can either. Like even that Dan Quinn, that Doug Peterson guy, I felt the same way about all those guys. When I look at DeMeco Ryans, I'm going, no, let's really get the Packers nervous, because they're nervous right now. You know what? Every offseason, they laugh at their little meeting and say, they got Spielman and Zimmer. They're not going to. That's over with now. Now we're in their head a little bit. So I think you do give the younger guy, and I'm glad you guys agree with me on that. I mean, I like Raheem Morris. I like anybody likes experience, but man, everybody's starting young and new. And let's not forget, this is like Nick said, this is a new approach as the NFL. Everybody's been scared to take that step. We're taking that step with the analytics half of it.
I mean, in a couple of months, we can laugh at the Packers because without Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, they're a CFL team. But,
we got to take the North back, guys. I'm getting sick.
We are
sick of it.
Absolutely. And that's what's going to happen.
Now,
Absolutely.
Now, if they don't hire DeMeco Ryans, they do hire Raheem Morris. I think he's the second best choice.
I do too.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Because, I mean, like Nick said when he was on, I mean, Raheem Morris I think he was 31 or 32 when he became the Bucs coach. That was, 10 years ago?
I'll see if I can pull it up while we're talking here.
Okay, so he's still a young guy. And
Sure.
if folks, I just want to tell you, if Raheem Morris does get hired, don't be discouraged. I
don't mean I'm going to hate. I would like it too, Ted. I see what you're saying.
I would take his time in Tampa Bay with a grain of salt, because when you look over that roster and you look over the players he had to work with, he was a young guy with very little experience, kind of like DeMeco Ryans might be.
But he's a player's coach.
But he didn't have that kind of that coaching it factor like Mike Tomlin had. Like I covered training camp in 2006, and Tomlin was a guy you're like, that's a dude that's going places. I mean, he stood out more than Childress. I mean, you're like, that dude's going to be somebody someday. And he was just energy and fire and just up in his players' faces one minute and then hugging them and telling them they were awesome the next. I mean, the guy was an exceptional motivator. Right. And from everything I've heard, DeMeco Ryans is the same way, and so is Raheem Morris. So, I mean, if you value experience, maybe Morris might be your guy, but don't be surprised or disappointed if it's either Ryans or Raheem Morris.
I wouldn't be disappointed because the players love playing for him. As we heard again from Nick Olson said that tonight. I've heard that from like 5 or 6 other people and that was a disconnect that Zimmer had with his players. You can try to talk me out of that, but I won't believe you. I don't believe the players liked him.
At the end, I agree. At the very beginning, I think it worked, and then they just sort of parted ways about 2016, 2017.
So just so we're clear, Raheem Morris was 33 when he first took over when he got the head coaching job in Tampa. That's 4 years young. That's almost 5 years younger than DeMeco Ryans would be, because he's 37 now. He'd be 38 by the time the 2022 season starts. So he's significantly younger than Ryans would be if he were to get the job now. So
what if Morris got the head coaching job and Ryans got the DC/head coaching job assistant?
I mean, I don't think the Niners would let him get away for that.
Yeah, I think
if a team can't deny a guy the opportunity to interview for a head coaching job to be considered a promotion, but I don't think they'd let him make a lateral move. They'd back an armored truck full of cash up to his house and say, here, just take what you want.
Are you guys hearing any other names besides those two? Clue me in so I can write them down on my sheet. I mean, guys that are really in the running. I think they've interviewed 8 guys or something?
Yeah, Chris Thomason did mention the Nathaniel Hackett thing.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down
a little while ago.
What's the offensive coordinator for the Rams? O'Connell.
Kevin O'Connell.
He's had 2 interviews with the Vikings now as well.
I think, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna write those 2 names down. Add to my list.
So I think the only guys that have had, and I could be wrong on this, the only guys that have had 2 interviews are Ryans, O'Connell, and I think Dan Quinn had a second interview, but I don't remember for sure exactly what that was.
Dan Quinn is interviewed with the Vikings? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So him and Kellen Moore, I think, interviewed it right around the same time.
Okay, maybe it was only 1 interview then, but they've only had a handful of guys in for a second interview. Ryans came in for his second interview after the Vikings finished Adofo-Mensah's initial interview. So he was a guy. Yeah. Adofo-Mensah said DeMeco Ryans is a guy I want you to interview because he's somebody I'm interested in. And the Wilfs said the new general manager will definitely have input on who the new head coach is.
Yep.
So, all right, boys, we got anything else we got to cover? Or are we good?
Goddamn Ravens are taking my Michigan defensive coordinator back, but that's a different show for son of a bitches. Yep, he's going back to Baltimore, leaving Michigan. Right. It's probably good news for Ryan Day.
Yeah. Ryan Day is going to be a nightmare for you next year, no matter
what are we going to cover the next we're covering head coach, right? I mean, I'll be the next guy next on the Vikings agenda, right?
Yeah, I would hopefully. Let me ask you that before we get out of here. Next step, obviously, is head coach before they start doing any roster review. Chris, when do you expect? Not who, but when? How long a time frame do you think before the next head coach will be announced?
I mean, it kind of depends on who they're waiting on. I mean, if they're still waiting on D'Amico Ryans and the 49ers win this weekend, well, you gotta wait until after the Super Bowl to officially bring him in. So if it could be a while, we'll have to see how the games play out this weekend. If it's D'Amico Ryans, like we're all hoping it is, it could be, as early as Monday or Tuesday next week if the Niners lose the NFC Championship game. And if they don't, we're gonna have to wait until the middle of February when the Super Bowl finishes up. So it could be just about, it just matters who they're waiting on pretty much at this point.
Drewster?
It's either a week from today, or if they're waiting, it's going to be Ryan's. I have some NFL news real fast.
What's that?
Joe, I want to get it right. Joe Shane, who got hired by the Giants as their new general manager 3 days ago.
Yep.
He has announced that they are going to build a team around, what's that quarterback?
Danny
Daniel
Dimes.
Jones.
Yeah, he's going to build their their offensive team around Daniel Jones. That's what Joey Shane said. I just wanted to let you know that an hour ago, Joe Shane was fired as the general manager of the New York Giants based on his Daniel Jones decision.
Man, he got less time in the chair than Fran Foley. That's impressive. Damn.
That's tremendous, man.
Oh, wow.
All right, I'm done. I'm not going to top that. I'm out.
Great show tonight, guys. Great show. Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate listening to you guys and learning.
Awesome stuff again. We all want to thank Nick Olson for taking time out of his day and coming on and making us smart on analytics and what all that means for the new Vikings general manager moving ahead, for the team in general, and kind of how this might very well be a new trend, how the Vikings are actually setting a trend in the NFL. And it's not Lake Minnetonka boat cruise trends either for once. It's awesome. Love it.
Thank you to everybody who joined us tonight, too. I forgot to say that. So.
Yeah, thanks to everybody who joined us. Weren't nearly as interactive as I was. I was really trying to absorb the knowledge Nick was passing along. I thought he had some great stuff. Hope to have him again sometime soon. Chris, what do you got for getting us out of here?
This was a great thing. I'm probably gonna have to go back and listen to it again just to make sure I get all the information that Nick was putting out there and not missing anything. But yeah, he brought us some really great knowledge. Like you said, we're three old dudes that aren't necessarily into analytics and that kind of stuff. But it sounds like it's high time we probably better start. So that is a good kind of intro for us. And yeah, it's going to be it's a new era, kids. So yeah.
Drewster?
Thank you guys thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Thank you, Toonses, for getting it set up with Nick Olson to be on the show. And I gotta say, every week I say the same thing. Ted, Smitty, Mr. Simi Valley Roundtable, you are our Mensa as a hosting. You are the best host in the business, man.
Thank you.
And it's really, you do a great job. You make this really easy for me because I have no idea what I'm doing. And we'll be back a week from Saturday we don't have a studio show Saturday. We'll be back a week from Saturday. And it's just really exciting times, guys.
Real quick, hey,
time and
don't mean to put you guys on the spot. Are we going to do a live hit again if the Vikings name a coach between now and next Saturday?
Chicks can't hold their smoke. I told you that.
That's what it is.
I'll do a live show every day with you cats, man.
No, I'm not doing a live show every day. I'm too old and grumpy.
We can't do that.
No, we're gonna do one when the head coach is announced. Do you want to do another one?
If it's between now and next Saturday, we're gonna do a live one. One more live one.
Of course. Why
not?
All
right. What are we gonna do? We're gonna do it what?
We're doing it live.
I'll write it. We'll do it live.
God almighty.
You guys are awesome.
All right,
man.
so there you go. If the Vikings have a head coach announced between now and the Saturday between the NFC AFC Championship and the Super Bowl, I guess we're doing another live show. If not, we'll be back next Saturday at our regularly scheduled time. Drewster, thanks so much. Chris, thanks so much. Nick Olson, thanks so much. Toonses, thank you for making all the magic happen here. Without you, none of this happens. To everybody that watched us, we really appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Hope you learned something tonight. I know I did. Skol Vikings. We'll see you on. We'll check you later.